Howdy, dangerous wisdom friends. Dr. Nikos here. If you're watching on YouTube, the video will start soon. I want to preface this interview with a delightful boon. I'm really excited to be able to do this. First, let me say how much I enjoyed speaking with my wisdom sister, Kelly Wendorf. As soon as our dialogue started, I felt a warm and special connection with Kelly. She has the soul of a true spiritual warrior, and she brings together the indigenous wisdom of horses and the wisdom of indigenous elders of the human tribes. I think you'll find this dialogue enlivening for the heart, mind, body, soul, and world. And I recommend you read her book, Flying Lead Change, which we discuss in this episode. Now here's the great boon, and I'm so pleased to be able to offer this out of the great generosity of Kelly and her team. They have decided that anyone who listens to this episode can take one of their online courses for free. That's a 100% discount on a course that normally has a tuition of $457. So it's a really valuable thing. I'm so happy to be able to offer this to you, and so pleased and touched that Kelly and her team have offered this. The course is called How to Lead a Transformative Life. Now, who doesn't want to learn about that? We live in a time that calls all of us to live transformative lives. Sometimes that call is rather uncomfortable. And Kelly offers a blueprint for transformation based on spiritual and ecological realities. I'm very pleased to see, as an educator myself, that the class sizes are small. There's a low student-teacher ratio, and that allows for the possibility of, first of all, more personalized experience and the chance to get at real depth. It's become very commonplace to quote Ram Dass and his famous line, "We're all just walking each other home." As a horsewoman, Kelly knows that walking with our equine friends and teachers makes that journey home all the more magical. Now, obviously, there won't be horses in the online course, but their wisdom, spirit, and many blessings will be there as they have infused Kelly's vision and values. Now, I have some experience studying the wisdom traditions, but let me say this is the kind of online course I would love to take myself, and in fact, you might just see me there if my schedule allows it. Now, you'll find a link in the show notes to register for the course, along with a code to use for your 100% discount. The course runs on 2 consecutive Saturdays for 2 hours each day. Although, for some listeners, that's going to be 2 consecutive Sundays. And let me send greetings to all our Dangerous Wisdom fans in Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand, and other time zones far in advance of this one. And to Kelly, I send very big hugs, cosmic hugs, which I invite her to share with our other wisdom sister, Cynthia Jers. Please do give Cynthia a hug for me, Kelly. That's another great dialogue all of you will enjoy if you haven't heard it already. Look up that dialogue with Cynthia. Thank you so much, Kelly, for your generosity and for all you do. Much love to you and your human and more than human team, including the sacred land where you live. Okay, friends, let's get this philosophical rodeo started. Welcome to Dangerous Wisdom, a journey into mystery and a gateway to the mind of nature and the nature of mind. Auspicious interbeing to you and yours, my friends, Koinos Hermes. This is Dr. Nikos, your friendly neighborhood soul doctor, and I'm here with you so that we can together create a culture of wisdom, love, and beauty. And we have help today from a special guest and the many special beings she's connected to. I have with us Kelly Wendorf. She's the author of this book. We're going to be talking about it. It's called Flying Lead Change. Let me tell you about her. This is going to be an exciting episode. Those of you who know podcasts know that I love horses. There's no question about that. And you know how special I think they are. And we're going to find out a little bit more about that today. Let me tell you about Kelly, though. She's the founder and CEO of Equus. So you know that's horse. Kelly Wendorf is an ICF, that is International Coach Federation Master Certified Coach, published author, spiritual mentor, disruptor. Don't worry, everyone. It's going to be all right, and socially responsible entrepreneur. Her early experiences were vitally and deeply shaped by the natural and ancient world around her, where she learned a way of listening to forces within people, nature, and moments. This unconventional education grants her a gift of perception that liberates untapped potential and hidden gifts within individuals and organizations, helping them to solve problems differently through a wisdom-informed and wholeness approach. Now, come on, Dangerous Wisdom lovers, you know that's my game. That's the jam here on Dangerous Wisdom. Throughout her life, she has lived and worked around the world, studying with many spiritual and indigenous leaders in India, Africa, Indonesia, and Australia. Such immersion in multicultural perspectives has honed a passion for creating a new narrative in the human condition, empowering high-performing individuals, organizations, and their leaders to wield meaningful change in their families, communities, and the world through servant leadership and innovative business development. She's worked with a spectrum of clientele, from Amazon to Microsoft to some of the most underserved communities. She has been called a corporate shaman and CEO whisperer. We got to do a lot of CEO whispering right about now. Elon Musk, I'm talking to you. Okay. She's known for being a trustworthy translator of ancient cosmology's contemporary relevance. Kelly founded, edited, and published Kindred Magazine, which was an evidence-based publication exploring the social, cultural, and biological underpinnings of a compassionate society. She spent 15 years there, immersed in the fields of neuroscience, neuropsychology, and their relationship to social justice and transformative cultural change. And we're going to talk to her about her work as the founder of Equus and this book related to that work called Flying Lead Change. And what is a flying lead change? We're going to get to that very quickly. Kelly, welcome to Dangerous Wisdom, my wisdom
Thank
sister.
you. Thank you, Nikos. And it's nice to be here and nice to be part of your listener community. So thank you for your time.
Yeah.
So
Hang on
your
one
question.
second, Kelly.
Yeah. Here we go.
No. Yeah, here we go. Wait one second. There we go. So I have an edit to do now because for some reason your track turned off. That's never happened, Kelly, but I take it to be a synchronicity. So
Great.
let me do this again. I'm going to, I don't have to do everything again, but we'll just assume that I just finished saying welcome to Dangerous Wisdom. So let me, give me one second. So, the, and here we go. Kelly Wendorf, welcome to Dangerous Wisdom.
Thank you, Nikos. It's so great to be here and be a part of your community.
Great to have you, and a wisdom sister of a wisdom sister. We both have
Mhm.
a shared friend in
We
Cynthia
do.
Jurs, and
Yeah.
she was here. Those of you who didn't listen to that interview, Cynthia had a beautiful book. She's doing beautiful work in the world, and Kelly is too. So, Kelly, can you start us up? Well, first of all, let's before we get to the title of the book, let's just for people who haven't experienced an equine-based learning experience of
Mhm.
some kind. What is it that you do with horses, and why in the world? What does that have to do with changing myself, changing the world? What do I need a horse for?
Why? Yeah. What do we need a horse for? Well, so the equine assisted industry is, it's pretty vast. We've got equine assisted therapy and equine assisted learning and equine assisted coaching. And it's an unregulated industry. So you have a spectrum of talent and skill sets and ways that, people approach that industry. Um, my work is equine assisted learning or equine assisted coaching. Um, but my particular way in is in recognition that the horse has come to us as a wisdom companion. I My father is an esteemed archaeologist, or was an esteemed archaeologist. He worked on the team with Leakey and helped find Lucy. And so my childhood meant that I was hanging out a lot on different digs around the world, in Ethiopia and Egypt and northern New Mexico. And so I was exposed to a lot of different cosmological views from the indigenous people that we were around. Not necessarily like intellectually, immersed in it because I was really too young to understand that, but because I was left largely to my own devices as a kid, I was just kind of in the soup of those communities and picked up on a lot of ways of being, without necessarily knowing that that's what was happening, that I was kind of infused with some of the felt senses um, of of worldviews, of how people organize themselves around each other, around the natural world. And I tell you all this because that's really the underpinning behind the work that I do. That I had the privilege of being exposed to the sanity of some of these communities, contrasted to the insanity that we find ourselves in now. And as a coach, I really could experience that the horse offered that similar immersion. Um, so I learned when I was very young that from an indigenous point of view, that the horse is a wisdom companion who, came from the stars, came from the heavens, was a gift from the stars or the star people to humanity to help us to choose our way forward from a place of love as opposed to separation. And some of these stories, some of these prophecy stories point to this time in human history where we have made a series of fatal errors towards disconnection, and the horse has come to support us to choose differently. Um, and it's been my experience. I mean, I was a lifelong horsewoman and crazy horse girl when I was small. But when you create a context for the horse that is different than, and you know this too, Nikos. I mean, this has probably been your experience that when you create a context for a horse that's different than you're going to win me ribbons, we're going to run around these barrels, but the context is reverence and connection and interconnection and that humility of what can you teach me, what can you show me. The horses show up with a completely different kind of invitation, and it's concentric, it's relational, it's kind of quantum, it's magical, it's biological. There's just all these layers that start to come into a session with someone when they're in the company of the horses in this way. So I realized that if I was going to support people, and really anybody who comes to Equus are the right people to be here. So I work with anybody and everybody who does come here. My One of my favorite places to work is in the space of the corporate sector, because you've got people who wield enormous influence across countries, the lives of millions and millions of people. And if the horses can consult with and guide people who are in these positions of power, um, then we might just have a chance at getting out of this alive. And it's really been fascinating to see how the horses call people in to a way of being. They don't call them out on what's not working for them, or how they're not present, or how they are using a power over approach to the way they're leading their teams. They don't call them out, they call them in, which is a different gestalt, right?
Mhm.
And it's a non-shaming gestalt. And that calling in really touches people, and you can have some of the most hardened you know, folks who are cynical and believe there's only one way to do business leave the arena in tears and completely their whole mind and heart rearranged towards a different possibility for themselves, for their teams, for their families, their own relationships. So to answer your question, why horses? There are many reasons why, but one of the reasons why is because they have been appointed. They have this mantle that they have been passed to help us, to be a sacred companion of wisdom for us. That's one reason.
Mm.
Um, Another reason is they're one of the oldest, most successful mammals on the planet. The second only to the platypus, I believe, which is 150 million years. So, I know in listening to some of the work that you do, just the way that you have talked about the 3.8 billion years of evolutionary intelligence that's here for us through the natural world. And of that evolutionary intelligence, you've got a mammal who has been around, for 56 million years, lived through tectonic shifts, lived through climate changes, lived through volcanic mega explosions, and they're still here. I think the number is of all the species that have ever been on planet Earth, 99% have gone extinct or evolved to new forms. So the horse is one of the oldest members of that 1% of survivors. So when people are working with horses, they're working with a system that has that success rate, that has that evolutionary intelligence. And our nervous system gets to be positively informed by that evolutionary intelligence. And, this power over paradigm that we're in is relatively new on the human horizon. Depending on where you put the needle, around 6,000, between I think 10 and 6,000 years is when we started to kind of turn the corner towards more oppressive ways of doing business, of doing this human business. Um, so what's in our DNA is, well over 190,000 years of more inclinations towards peace, collaboration, cooperation, generosity, these kinds of things. So when you're with the horse, it's as if they wake up parts of our DNA that have been dormant for the last 6,000 years and just a little bit turn, the inner compass, just a few degrees, doesn't need to be a huge shift, but, that few degrees translates into a completely different trajectory in someone's life.
Mhm.
So my job as a co-facilitator with the horses is to just hold that space, to allow that to happen for people, to not get in the way, to trust the horses and to just let that happen. So
Mm.
that's why horses.
Yeah. Well, there's something particularly interesting in the turn that you're talking about and in this ancient species relationship. There, we could argue, we could tell a grand historical narrative that locates the turn toward conquest consciousness in the maybe archetypal form of enslavement in the dominant culture, which is the enslavement of the horse. So,
Mm-hmm.
so what's weird about that is it's very possible that if we didn't enslave the horse would be extinct like the mastodon.
Mm-hmm.
It's really weird that all the horses that we have today pretty much come from our act of intervening in their evolutionary destiny. There's a way in which we save them, but we save them almost in spite of the violent impulses that began to be formed there.
Yes.
And then we use the horse to carry that conquest consciousness everywhere. And we don't even know how much we're affected by it. We don't realize that if you're wearing pants right now, friends, that's because we're horses. There were riders. The oldest known pair of pants we have were found in an area of China, and they were riding pants, and they were very ingeniously crafted. Tetanus shots were originally developed with horses. If you're using hormone replacement therapy as a woman, that's horses. But everything that you see, It
Mhm.
only is here because of horses. And so what's so strange is that when we confront them, it's almost like we're returning through all that karma and saying, okay, now let's liberate each other. We
Yes,
enslaved you and somehow
yes,
saved you. Can you save us by getting us to give this all up, this crazy road that we went down with you?
absolutely. And I love that your mind went there because it's almost as if their enslavement was like it was consensual. And I've seen this with horses and just my own personal journey with horses where, when I was in my 20s and I was a dressage trainer and everything we did with our horses was all that conventional approach, power over approach with horses. We all thought we loved our horses, but we didn't really understand kind of what we were levying against them and against their spirits. And yet I've seen them time and time again go, oh, that's how you want to relate to me? Okay. Okay. It's like such graciousness.
Yeah.
You only want to see me as that. Okay, I'll do that. You just need me as a kind of dumb companion animal to your other what, okay, I'll do that. And it's all because they're powerful, they're fierce, they could do otherwise if they wanted to. They could make things much more difficult for us, but they didn't. They went into wars with us, they tilled our fields, they conquered lands, they won ribbons. And I'm reminded of this, the cartoonist Gary Larson,
Hmm.
hilarious cartoonist. And he has this one cartoon where I think they're cows, they're in a field and they're on two legs and they're smoking and sipping coffee together and talking, standing up. And one kind of cow on the edge goes, car. And as soon as the car comes over, the cows are just down on all four legs eating grass again. And it's like the horses are shapeshifters in a way and go, if you want us to be that kind of dumb, farm animal, if that's what it takes to stay alongside you in this larger, more epic journey of, I don't know, what could we call this journey? This journey of um, love and companionship and beauty, and then we get lost. We're lost and we lose that, and then a reclamation of who we really are.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
I think you're right too, in the sense that I imagine, the story that sometimes gets told in the scholarship. I think David Anthony makes this argument, and some other people repeat it, but that horse riding happened because some teenage boy, in games of one-upmanship, decided to mount a horse, because that would be crazy. And I
right.
actually imagine, since they were under our control for longer than we were riding them, and that women were probably often around them a lot. I actually imagine that it wasn't this wild some guy, but like a woman who knew her horse so well after spending time and just realized, hey, you'd probably just let me do this. And probably that's what happened. And
Yeah.
she probably was maybe potentially horrified by what became of that, because it becomes an instrument of conquest without which you couldn't have conquest on the scale that we had. I mean, it's just
Right.
not possible for Alexander the Great to
Right.
have done what he did, except that he had Bucephalus,
Right.
right? And
Right.
there's, yeah.
So then it makes us question, or at least it makes me kind of question and wonder, like, well, if all of this was consensual, and if the lostness and the conquering and the violence and the everything, what if, you know, it just opens up this idea of like, what if it's all meant to be? What if this whole kind of lostness and getting found, that we really are kind of on the right path? Because who we are on the other side of this lostness, like if we survive the next millennia with AI and all the, everything that's going on right now, then the capacity that we will have had, or that we will have because we've grown through those dark times,
Mhm.
is unfathomable, right?
Right.
So it kind of, I don't know, sometimes when I get into these places where I'm really despairing and I'm really worried about what's going on in the world, I pan back that camera to this much longer, um, this much bigger story, this much older story, and think, well, it maybe it's all happening according to plan. You know,
Mm,
the horse was meant, if I trust my horses implicitly, and I do, then their consensualness is not because they're weak, but because they're wise.
hmm
And sometimes the joining with something is the best way to help it then move out of something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a very kind of Aikido spirit.
Yes, yes, yeah, 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 beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, but back to the like getting on the first horse. So um I just you know, you look at the back of a horse, and for me anyway, and I wonder if you resonate with this, but you see this beautiful, you know, this beautiful sway, this sort of Picasso line, and I'm not dared to get on it. Like, let's see if I can ride this horse. I'm like, I feel like so invited to kind of nestle in this wonderful sway. And so I do wonder, was it someone who was more sensitive, who sort of took time to have a relationship with? There's a wonderful trainer named Elsa Sinclair who has a little movie that you can rent called Taming Wild, where she did ask this question: if a horse was given a true choice, no, you know, whips, no coercion, no lead ropes, no carrots, no sticks, would they allow us to ride? And so she adopted a Mustang and went about exploring if that was possible. And she did. Well, should I spoil alert? Yeah. I mean, eventually she did end up riding this horse with no bridle, no saddle, all over the place. It took many, many months. There were many setbacks for when she may have overplayed her hand or betrayed a trust in some very subtle way that she didn't realize. And the horse would then go, forget this. We're not going to do this. And then at some point, they have this very magical connection.
Mm.
So I'd like to think that was the beginning.
Who knows? Yeah, because it's still a hotly debated thing, and I appreciate, people who have tried to look at things like pressure scans and the real deeper evolutionary lines, which of course we interfered with, and we interfered with them particularly to get stronger backs, but that still doesn't mean that those previous 55 million years of evolution developed the horse to really do this very, very effectively. So, I mean, I appreciate that there are a lot of questions, but I also
Yes,
think it's interesting when you talk about whatever our answers are to those, that it just the feeling that they're somehow either individually we may feel lost or fragmented, or we may look at the code like maybe I think, oh, well, I'm fine. It's all these other crazy people, who elected the person I didn't like, or who, whatever, who don't like the person I wanted to have elected.
hmm,
And so there's this, when you have that level of fragmentation, I think Jung's work makes this really clear. That is the time you need a symbol, because the symbol is the only way you're going to get out of the
yes,
crazy. You can't figure out how to get there or you'd be there. So
right.
you can't envision really what you're going to be. But a symbol says it's almost like an opening that says just step through here. And I promise you, what's on the other side is what you're feeling when you look at the symbol. And the horse is that symbol still.
I agree.
It just
Yeah.
still, it's just you, there it is. And not necessarily for every human, but for so many humans, there is some access to something through this mysterious door that looks like a horse on the front of it.
Yes. On this side looks like a horse, right?
And then what's on the other side is just
Right.
your journey, your mystery, your
Yeah.
insight, your healing,
Yes.
and maybe the healing of the culture, because that should be part of it, that we go there to bring back something that we can use to inform the culture.
Yes. I love that. And that is a bit my experience because so many people come here saying, um, I don't know why I'm coming. I've just been so pulled to the horse my whole life, even though I've
Mhm.
never ridden,
There
or
you
I'm
go.
so pulled to work with the horses, even though I'm terrified of horses, or this white horse keeps appearing to me in a dream. It's like the horse has captured the imagination of visionaries, leaders, artists, poets, musicians, right? It's just like it's a thing. And they've
Yeah.
even done studies, and I don't have the numbers exactly, but where like magazines know that if they have a horse on a cover or a horse on an ad or a horse somewhere, the pickup rate is radically more because people are so compelled,
There you go.
and what is that? Why not giraffes or, like, what
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are other spiritual keystone species. That's what I refer to. Wisdom companion, I
Mhm.
really love, obviously, because they are Sophia's beings. I often refer to them as Sophia's totem beings. But, wolf is very powerful, and there are other beings but there is something so, because also there is a weirdness to the horse in that you don't really see that combination of strength, speed and size really anywhere else. That is something about the horse that is just, it is
Mhm.
incomparable. And the uniqueness that we feel then, it's clear that, Jung would say it's archetypal. And
Yes.
you can't really see that what it's speaking to, but it is a magic that, as you say, invites, but magic evokes in us. So there is a
Mm,
magic that the horse invites us into, and that is a magic of transformation for sure. Yeah.
absolutely. And like, even to the listeners right now. So I just imagine some listeners taking a walk right now or driving in their car as they're listening and just conjuring the imagined image of a horse in your mind right now conjures or summons a felt sense response that there's something even deeper, even if you have a felt sense response of, I love horses, I'm scared of horses, but there's an even deeper felt sense response that kind of, I don't know, it ignites, it draws, it compels, it sort of pulls forward, it
Hmm.
calls one to something. And that in and of itself is already enough.
Yeah.
Like if you just allow that somatic um, response to kind of arise in your body, that is going to do something
Yeah.
already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because of for Jung, the archetype is deep, and he speaks of a 2 or 3 million-year-old person inside us
Mm,
with that same sort of idea. You were saying 150,000. Jung says no, we're talking 2 or 3 million years, because for him the archetypes are the creation of the world too. They're not merely in the human mind. No, they are what generate everything. Those patterns of energy, and so we see them and we're responding, but it's with such a deep thing that we don't have conscious access to. But for Jung, that's where all your resources are at. You want
yeah.
that to be, it's necessary for the therapy to proceed for him, for
Hmm.
that to be activated. It's not a mere, sort of psychotherapy in the way I think we're used to. He really
Right.
is seeing a much deeper thing. Hmm.
I love you just said a word that really resonates for me. And you said it activates as an activation.
Hmm.
So, and I think you write about this too, like there's these archetypes are an activation. They activate something, and that's not nothing.
Right. Oh
That
yeah, yeah.
activation is something that is worth allowing and pay and spending time with and following.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important that, the incredible case of the placebo effect is the man who was supposed to only have like a week or two left to live, but out of compassion, the doctor offered to include him in a clinical trial, thinking, well, it's all right, we just put him
Mhm.
in the trial, and
Right.
well, he starts the trial and he starts seeing immediate results and has a complete remission, and the doctor is astonished. I cannot believe, because this person had like, grapefruit-sized tumors. It was just like, what? How is this possible? Then the guy goes home. He's happy. 6 months later, he comes across a news article that questions the efficacy of the drug that he was just in the trial of. Well, within a few weeks, he's back and he's got cancer and he's on his way to die again. The doctor realizes, okay, if there's ever been a placebo effect, this guy has got it. So
Mhm.
he doubles down on it. He says, you know what? It's okay. We've got a more purified, double strength version of this protocol you were on. Definitely going to work for you. So they put him back on. Sure enough, he goes back home. A few months later, he reads an article that definitively discounts this drug and he dies. And so, but this activation is not nothing. It is to say
Right.
that this is where healing is at, and it's
Yes.
not just it's some kind of chemical intervention, especially at a cultural level. What are we going to do? Put LSD in the water? You have a medicine that will work if you are willing to work with it.
Yes.
Can we talk about this? So here we're touching this potentially magical energy that is there. And I mean this, and everybody knows that I'm very rational about this, but it's that listen to that story. It's a documented story. So flying lead change would be like a kind of magical power if we pull this off. Can you explain what that means? Why is that the title? Why do we need that image as part of the symbol of the horse right now?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Mm. I just love this conversation about activation. For the non-horsey people, a flying lead change it's a term to describe a gymnastics maneuver that a horse makes naturally in the wild, but also has become kind of in the show circuit. It has become a sort of gymnastic feat that is quite beautiful, and people really love to value it. And but the physics are this that you you have a four-legged animal and four-legged animals don't tend to travel in a very straight line. They tend to travel in arcs or micro arcs, depending on the topography and depending on, you know, the balance of their body on those four legs. With a horse, if you're, well, with any four-legged animal, but particularly with a horse, if a horse is running, cantering, it would be a term, or galloping, they reach out with one side of their body that supports a little bit of a lean. So if you're galloping to the left, your left leg, your left front leg, and your left hind leg are going to be reaching out a little further. And you can watch your dogs do this when they're running, not too fast, because it's hard to see when they're too fast, but and they reach out, and it's because it's supporting a little bit the lean that happens when a horse is arcing to the left or to the right. They're on their what's called their right lead if they're arcing a little to the right. So they'll stay on that lead until something changes. And when the topography changes, which means they either have to bend differently or lean differently and accommodate that bend, they have to change from one lead, from the right, let's say the right lead, where the right hind and right front are sticking out further and leading, to a left lead. To do that, they have to bounce off the ground and suspend in midair to switch those legs from right pairs of legs to left pairs of legs. And then they come down on the ground and they're on the left side. So I thought this was an amazing metaphor because our topography is changing, as we all know right now. Um, and the balance of power is very much leaning on one side. And it's been leaning on one side, and this balance of power has been in this way for a while, and it needs to change. And so we can't just sort of change the leg, the lead we're leading with. We have to take an evolutionary leap and sort of change the power center to another, you could say, side of our brain, to another way of being, from power over to power with. Um, and when we talk in biological terms and we talk about evolution, we talk about how a species bounces forward. So, like when an octopi hacks parts of his DNA, so that he can adapt to warmer waters in the ocean. These are evolutionary leaps, like when a fish loses or a salamander grows legs. That's a leap. That's called a bounce forward. And so we are called to bounce off of the current circumstances we're in, make a very clear change, clear change of balance to a new way forward, just like the flying lead change. And so I use the title that as the title of the book, because this is what the book is attempting to articulate, is how do we make that leap? How do we bounce forward? What are the conditions that we need to kind of pull together so that we can make that evolutionary leap forward?
Mhm.
And so the book kind of goes through um, ways to gather the intrinsic capacities that we have as human beings, things like presence and care. Um, we talk about all kinds of different dimensions of being that the horses teach us as a way to help us bounce forward. And so people who read the book and people who work with me, um, coaching clients and things, will often talk about their life going through a flying lead change.
Mhm.
um, Suddenly they have created the right optimal conditions for themselves, that they can start telling themselves the truth about things. They can start peeling away the veil of how colonized thinking works in their own life, and then suddenly everything changes. Their marriages change, their vocation changes, and so it's a powerful metaphor.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's like saying that we can have a sudden phase shift, like a
Hmm.
lot of systems can,
Hmm.
because we can find the change looks so daunting, and we can sometimes the ego tells a much scarier story about what's going to be required or how hard
Yeah.
it's going to be than what it
Yeah.
actually turns out to be. And maybe you will have to give up things that your ego is clinging to, but there's that image that somehow it's almost like a quantum shift. You were in one energy
Yes.
level, you drop to another one, and you get to emit light, which is
Yes.
nice if you're having a quantum shift. But so you get to have that, and there's a way in which it's happening midair when, ironically, you keep trying to do it from the ground. Like if I could just get my feet on the ground, and the horse is saying, no,
Right.
you can actually do this midair. And as a trivia, you probably know this, but for anybody who doesn't, well, you could arguably, the history of movies begins with horses too, because of trying to figure out if they really are all legs off the ground. And our own Leland Stanford, who founded Stanford University and was one of the robber barons, he bet a huge sum of money and then funded Muybridge's work, which
Oh,
photographed the horses he used, before the Matrix, he used sequential firing cameras and put them together to create a film. So anyway, but I love that image. That is really wonderful that we're trying to get ground under our feet. There's a way in which we're never going to have it. That's why I think, the wind horse is such a great symbol. This
yes.
is the space horse, the horse that doesn't need ground under her feet.
Right.
And we think we do, and that's part of what's getting us stuck. So I love your image because it's saying, don't worry, you just just do it midair.
It's midair. And I mean, there's so many like layers you could take this metaphor, because of exactly what you're saying. And part of that midairness is like you have to have the ability to let go of the known,
Yeah, that's
let
right.
go of where you think your feet are,
Yeah.
and bounce into like midair. And there is that moment, that liminal space inside any transformational process where it's like, whoa, where am I? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm no longer there and I don't know where I'm going. But I'm like in this place of the unknown, which
That's
is
right.
incredibly activating for so many people's minds, which is why so many people don't change and grow and transform, because their brains, their amygdalas go crazy,
Hmm.
and they'll cling to the earth, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so this
That's
is
why.
so go
Well, I
ahead.
was just going to say, but that's why I often reference, not that it's the best manual for spirituality, but The Cloud of Unknowing, which is a
Mm,
famous European English text on mysticism, and it's Christian mysticism, but it really emphasizes that if you're going to have the biggest shift you could have, according to whatever your worldview might be, you have to enter the unknown, and that's why
yes,
Socrates always tries to get people to get to that place where they feel they can't. Well, I don't know, Socrates. And as you point out, it freaks people out. Most of the time, they want to leave. But
yes,
only the one who's really serious and wants to have the wisdom companion, which is what Socrates saw the philosopher as, then you want to stay with them and be in that space, even if it's very uncomfortable, because you want to see what happens.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. It's that space. I love that you bring up the cloud of unknowing that's quoted in one of my books. That space is so powerful, and and probably this from the work that you do, that is the most wonderful place to accompany somebody, where they're at that liftoff point, right? Or they're in that space of emptiness, and groundlessness. And because anything is possible, like anything is possible from that place. And to be good company alongside folks when they're there and assure them that, you don't know what's going to happen, but this empty, scary, very dangerous feeling place is anything but that, you
Yeah,
know.
that's right. Yeah. The dangerous wisdom seems dangerous.
That's right.
And that's why we panic, but it's not really. It's
Yes,
only dangerous to those structures of ignorance that we're
yes,
clinging, where we're clinging,
yes.
where yes, it threatens ignorance, but if we just let go, because people can get freaked out. I mean, I've seen all sorts of range of reactions to that, and some of it is just
Mhm.
almost puzzling from the outside when you're looking at it, because it's but from the experience, people can be really, really challenged by it.
Yes.
So, and the
And
horse is so helpful with that. But go ahead, yeah.
yeah, well, and not only do they can they become their own worst enemies because they're freaking out, but the tribal shaming that can happen outside, like for example, someone leaves their job to maybe start a new business, but they don't really know that's going to happen yet, and all the friends from their old life are going, what's going on, this is crazy, what are you doing? And they'll levy a lot of change back behavior because it's also triggering for the people around the one who's in that free fall space. And
Mm,
they don't like to see their friends, beloved suffering, and it scares them. And it also scares a part of their brain that says, wait a minute, this person is leaving the fray. That's dangerous to the tribe. We can't have that. You need to come back here, back to earth,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's just tremendous challenge in that moment.
yeah. And what what that brings to mind a little bit, the research on how um, rates of schizophrenia are fairly consistent across cultures, but so-called developed cultures like the United States, a schizophrenic does much worse, far,
Mm,
far worse in terms of course of treatment and what happens compared to so-called developing or undeveloped cultures. One of the reasons being that in the places where the success rate is high is often a lot of community support for that person in this place where they don't know what's going on, and
uh-huh.
and there's meaning that's given to it, there's time, there's support, there's community, and then everybody seems to trust that this person's going to get to the other side, and that the meaning of it will become clearer and clearer as we go
Yeah.
through. So yeah, it shows, and it must make it hard because we can have these experiences. I remember Vine Deloria talking about being, I think he was at Harvard or something, and he was giving a talk, and they asked for, I don't know, somebody just said, "Can you do some sort of a ceremonial moment here?" And he said, I passed around a cigarette, basically. And everybody's so taken by the experience. And he said, there's such a lack of that in the culture. And Jung, of course, like bemoaned this. He said, you don't have any idea how crazy this is going to be. And the lawyer read Jung and said, yeah, he's right about it. And he said, but here's the thing, I know some of my brothers and sisters are they're running sweat lodges for people. They're doing this, they're doing that. And the people come, they have a nice experience. Maybe it's a really great healing experience. I don't know. But then they go back and there's no container for it now,
Right. There's
you
no
know?
container. That's
And
right.
so, I mean, what do you think we need to do? Because we see this across medicines. With psychedelic medicines, I think the same thing can happen. People can really, they can really get caught into spiritual materialism, whether
Yes.
the most common
Yes,
form
yes,
that
yes.
we talk about is spiritual bypassing, but it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It just means that on the surface, it looks like something really big and important is happening and that I'm doing the work. Actually, I'm not. And there isn't really a context for me to integrate it, even though there's all kinds of integration coaches and everything. Now, the horse is powerful medicine. And I would almost expect that the elements, the immune system of conquest consciousness is going to say, "No, I'm ready for this. I'm ready.
Mhm.
Go ahead, go see a horse. You ain't
Mhm.
getting anywhere. Go cry your
Mhm.
eyes out.
Mhm.
Come back and tell everybody about it. But I'm not changing." How do we how what do you think we need to do to try to confront and inoculate ourselves against that immune response? That's a
The immune
twisted
response. Yeah,
metaphor.
that is such a great question. That is a really great question. Okay. gosh, there's lots I could say about this, and I'm still scraping my knees on the pavement of that phenomenon of where people go back and there's nothing to support the person they're trying to become, or the
Yeah.
insights or awakenings, let's just call it that, that have
I
happened.
expect you're scraping your knees. I mean, I'm asking the question not because I expect you to have an answer, but that
Yeah.
we need to talk about this,
Yeah, we
right?
do. We do need to
Yeah.
talk about it. And one of the experiences I had, the reason I stopped running Kindred magazine, because when from the time I was quite young, I was really asking these important questions of what conditions need to be in place in order to help people to transform, to live from places of love and wisdom, how and beauty. How does that happen? What needs to happen? So my first attempt was to make this magazine when I was living in Australia, called Kindred. And what I saw with Kindred, we just were persistent for 12 years, and it was a very powerful education for me on many fronts. But I had the privilege of bringing in lots of academics to come and publish their pieces in the magazine, and these were people on the front lines of attachment parenting and neuroscience and systems theory, and they were really just thinking through just a lot of stuff on a lot of levels, and local farming, and just we were everywhere with this magazine. There was not one place we wouldn't touch. And here's what I learned is that the more information we gave our readership around things like, gosh, around, breastfeeding, how long you could breastfeed and how that creates better outcomes for your babies, around mother infant bonding, around not circumcising boys, around local farming. The more information we gave, the more it signaled a trauma response from the readership. It's like it hit that part of that enough, that immune response is
Yeah.
shame. It's
Hmm.
shame. People would want the messages the magazine had to offer, but only a few could hear without getting completely activated or defensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was like, this is so fascinating. I mean, we were a very popular magazine in Australia, and we were growing worldwide, but I was so fascinated to see that it's like only a few got through that immune response.
Mm.
Only a few people filtered through, and it was the shame. So I realized, like, it is not about what the brain thinks it's consuming or understanding. It is not about how many facts and figures people have about, you know, how what's going on with climate change, and here are all the stats. That is not what's going to change people. People having more information is not what's going to change people. All that does is activate the shame, which is the inflammatory response of the colonized view. So this is why I brought horses into the mix, because not because I necessarily was like, oh, they're going to solve the problem, but I realized it had to bypass, like, I had to give people an experience of something. And this experience bypassed the critical neocortex
Sure.
that was like ready and armed to be defended, right?
Yeah.
And it bypassed and went into the neural networks. Now, you could say the same with, plant medicine or whatever,
Yeah.
that could do it. My experience with the horses, and maybe I've just drank the Kool-Aid, okay, and I just have a lot of bias here, but I've been watching what happens to the people who leave here. Do they go back to their old ways, or does the change keep happening? And I think that the change they experience and the awakening they experience here with the horses sticks. And
Mhm.
even though they're going back to, and what happens is they go back and their lives change. Anything that's not aligned with the awakening falls away. And anything that is aligned with that awakening sticks.
Hmm.
Um, why would that? Why? I don't really have the data to prove. I can't be that placebo doctor.
Yeah. Well, because I guess there are so many questions about what we track and how, because I imagine that plant medicines have an impact that's comparable to an experience with horses. You know,
Hmm.
having worked with both and having worked within the wisdom traditions, I think, okay, these are all very potent medicines. Um, and in spite of that, I think that people, what I sometimes see, for instance, is a person who works at Google. Yes, they're changed spiritually, but they're still working at Google.
Yeah,
Arguably, maybe in some cases they feel that they have to. In other cases, it's just there's not always the registration that certain things that I do aren't actually in alignment because I maybe don't know enough. I
right.
mean, maybe
Or they
that's
look at
part of
Google to try and change it from the inside. That
they
also happens.
might. They
But
might, yeah. That seems unlikely with an organization like Google. But yeah, I mean, I understand. And sometimes that's part of the spiritual materialism is that I might tell myself that. And
mm,
it's so hard to know because of skillful
it
means. I
is.
remember once Thich Nhat Hanh talking about how somebody in his, who got involved with his community as a lay practitioner, but, very serious and go on retreats. And they asked him, I work in the nuclear industry. And I don't know what to do because it's what I have a degree in nuclear engineering. And had
Right.
I met you before that, I might not have gotten that degree, but I've got a wife, I've got 3 kids. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, look, you just need to reflect on your situation. But I will say that maybe that's the kind of place that needs mindfulness.
Mm,
And so he's like offering it as not really a rationalization, but just, hey, we can't necessarily do everything. But I'm just sensitive to this larger conversation because of how I think how challenging even the horse still is to the dominant culture. I mean, the fact that
yeah.
we're freaked out that there's a few tens of thousands of horses on millions of acres. No, well, we can't possibly have
Right.
this, as a way. I mean, we're in this place where they still themselves as a symbol create a lot of reactivity, whether
Yeah.
it's in amongst horse
Disruptors.
people. Yeah, they're disruptors like you. So yeah, but I'm pleased to hear that you are keeping track and that as far as you can tell, the things are continuing to unfold. Because I think in my own work, I tell people like write me a postcard 10 years from now. Like I
Yeah.
don't care how good you feel, don't tell me
Yeah.
about
Right.
it
Just
now.
tell me how you're doing.
Yes.
So, you know, there has been an exception to that rule. And that person's coming to mind, and I'm not at liberty to name the person, but suffice to say it's somebody who is and remains in the news and has for a very long time. Um, and they are doing not good things on the planet.
Sure.
And they spent time with me and the horses some years ago.
Yeah.
And what happened? What the heck happened? Now, and I'm keeping an eye on this person.
Sure. And sending horse energy. That's like a
Well,
nice version of
I'm
Tong
just
Len.
like, is this going to be a time release capsule, a kind of like
Yeah.
reverse Manchurian candidate that's
Right.
going to happen, that the horses, the horses do, maybe.
Maybe.
Um, so I'll write you a postcard in 10 years, and he goes and tell you what's happened with this person so far.
Okay. Send
But,
them to me next. We'll team up.
but, here's what I want to say. Um, we cannot underestimate the power of this immune response. It is
Hmm.
really something.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It really is. And if we underestimate it, then it's at our peril, really, because the shame that kicks in, and it's this weird thing where people, I saw it with the magazine, where just like, for whatever reason, it activates some deep belief that I don't matter, or I was spanked and I'm fine, or I don't know what, but it
Yeah.
just like flares up as this, like, you know,
Oh yeah.
um,
No, I see it all the time. Yeah, I mean, I see it with clients. Sometimes it'll just come up, something comes up in philosophical dialogue and that person, thinks that you're their parent who tortured them or, whatever. And okay, well, this is where we're at then. But because it has to flare up. And I think
Yeah.
too, it's not only, I love that you're saying that because this is, for me, this is such a central issue. I think it's one of the best things that Chogyam Trungpa did was write about spiritual materialism and
Hmm.
remind us that the Buddha says, hey, I'm giving you poison. Now, if you take it
Yes.
the right way, it's medicine, but
Yes.
otherwise, this is poison. But also not
100%.
to underestimate the power of the medicine when it starts working. I think
Yes.
sometimes
Yes.
of the novel Ceremony by Leslie Marmon Psycho, and it's so beautiful how this ceremony is just going on, and the guy thinks, that was a crazy ceremony, but he's still in it. And
Yeah.
so it really conjures this view that, hey, no, ceremony, what you thought it was this event that lasted an hour, but it started the moment you thought of going into the ceremony, and it's still unfolding. You're in it, you're in the ceremony. So right
Yes.
now that person is still with the horse. The horse is still with this person.
Yes. Oh,
And
heck yes.
yeah, we have to. I mean, it's
Yes.
not that we're being blind, but we're saying, no, the medicine's powerful. It's powerful.
Yes.
So
The
we have to
medicine
do
is
everything.
very powerful. And, I love that you bring in spiritual materialism because, gosh, I first went to India when I was 26, and really got wrapped around the axle of a lot of different spiritual movements and saw so much in terms of got abuse of power and narcissistic personality disorder stuff, and what a friend of mine calls gaslightenment, and all the kind of ways that the mind, the toxic mind, can grab a medicine and use it against, it becomes the poison.
Hmm.
And I would love, and maybe there's a book out there. I would love if there was a sort of like traveler's guide to the spiritual journey, that you don't get caught in some of those trappings.
Yeah, well, I mean, Trungpa's book is worth reading. Cutting
Uh-huh.
Through Spiritual Materialism.
That's right. That's a
Yeah,
great book.
that's
Yeah.
meant to be a guide to it.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just also an ongoing thing where it's just part of the evolving dialogue. And as these, we talk about these things very publicly. The Dalai Lama's spoken about these things, about
Yeah.
abuses and being really careful with teachers. And but it just all goes back to Buddha realizing how powerful the medicine was, and that that's the best warning label anybody's ever
It
put on
is.
anything. This is
Yes.
poison. And also, not just that it's poison, but hey, don't take it seriously. I just made it up. I grabbed what was laying around, and here it is. Okay, this will work. Trust me, but don't get freaked out and attached to it. There's other things we could do.
Yeah.
So. Well, let's talk about some of the lessons that the horses do teach us, sort of within a conceptual framework. Because I always take a stand for the importance of trusting that some kinds of information will sometimes work. Yeah.
Yes.
And the
Thank
one
you.
that I actually just had another dialogue recently where I was talking about Tim Inglis. Do you remember the congressman who was
Yes.
totally Republican approved, super arch conservative and anti-climate, all this bunch of, and then he goes on to the committee, the climate committee, and he says, I'm gonna debunk all of this. And so he tells the scientists in Greenland, I'm coming to see what you guys are doing. I'm going to debunk all this. Oh, okay, come. They show him the ice cores. They explain everything. Converted. If there was
Wow.
ever a guy who would be the poster child for, I
Right.
have an immune response, it's
Yes.
this guy. But the
Yes.
stuff is just, he's looking at the ice cores and saying, well, this all just makes too much sense. I was
Yeah.
wrong. And then naturally, this is the horror of shame, is that there's something deep in us that recognizes, because even Buddha said, if somebody has no shame, I can't teach them. Because if you do something wrong, you should feel badly about it. I'm not saying you beat yourself up or you say I'm a terrible person.
Right.
That wouldn't have even occurred to him that you would like the way we do it.
Right.
But it's weird how that goes together with conquest consciousness and the capitalist framework we have, because we have so much organized around praise and blame and debt and obligation. And so that debt becomes part. And so shame gets turned in from this thing that was important for the soul to recognize when we had really done something that we needed to make right.
Hmm.
And it's turned into this way to manipulate and control actively.
Absolutely. It went
And
from accountability,
yeah,
engendering accountability, to engendering like collapse and the exact opposite because of that
Right.
collapse and defensiveness,
Right.
non-accountability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's partly like we have to recover some positive sense of dignity. That
Yes.
that's what we want. And of course we feel badly for what we've done to horses and what we've done to the world and what we keep doing now. Of course, it's hard to look at, which is also why I think part of the immune response. Like for me, I just think like part of this is might be like I know it is a very minority view. My view is you don't get to have an equine encounter until I think you have enough compassion practice and mindfulness practice under your belt, like something where you've done the work to go and say, I'm going to be a student.
Hmm.
That's just part for me, part of how one way that we overcome it is that once you discover your capacity for compassion, you have discovered that you can turn towards something difficult that you feel uncomfortable about, maybe because you
Yes.
feel guilty.
Yes.
It can be such a good medicine for that.
It really can. Well, it creates a capacity to be accountable and just tell ourselves the truth about maybe what we've done, or but without kind of then taking the poison pill of I am therefore a terrible human being.
Right, exactly.
You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Um,
And we don't
yes,
see how much ego's in that. Like
right,
I'm unredeemable. Like, come on.
right,
Just
exactly.
relax. Yeah,
Yeah,
and the horse really confronts us with that by saying, like, your entire species is redeemable. It's okay. Yes,
that's
you
right.
built all of this on our bodies.
Yes.
Okay, but we're
Yes,
still here.
exactly. There's that graciousness, there's that
Yeah.
graciousness. It is so redeemable, and we miss you, we
Yeah.
miss you, human beings. There's a subtle kind of narrative. It's not so subtle, but and I used to really carry it around. I was so mortified by it being human. It's like, look at what we're doing to the earth, look what we're doing to each other. And I grew up with pictures of Vietnam on the cover of Time magazine. It was just like a horror show, and all the logging trucks going down the road. It was just this terrible thing. And I just always I was one of those environmentalists for a while that was like, well, the world will just be better off without us. And it was one of my Aboriginal Indigenous teachers who taught me that. He said to me once, and it really just got me. He said, nature misses you.
Yeah.
Like,
There you
wait,
go.
what? No, I'm like this perpetrator that like the earth would be better off without us, and without me. It's like, nature misses you. You're
Yeah.
an important part of all this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we could be like beaver and horse, the horse
yeah,
and grass made the prairies together
yeah,
and beaver made America in ways that we've forgotten. This
yeah.
place that we call America, Turtle Island, was so engineered. And it's okay to be an engineer if you do it with, as you say, with.
Hmm.
So, can we talk about the core lessons, some of the things that we can learn from horses that we can put a kind of conceptual framework
Yes,
around. So maybe the main lessons of horse
sure.
relationality, leadership,
Yeah,
something. I don't
sure.
know.
Yeah, sure.
Huh.
Let me just I'll offer a few. Let's
Yeah.
let's let's go there. So not a lot's been written about the culture of horses. A lot's is written about, how to make them jump higher, and that their backs are stronger, and there's been horse behavioral sciences for a long time, but not a lot's been written about their culture, and they have a culture just like wolves and elephants have a culture. And I think that this has not been, well, this has been stress tested. It's not as a result of a Harvard study or anything, but I think there's a few ways you could slice this. And I believe this is pretty sound based on my experience of hanging with horses for my whole life. That culture is based on 4 or 5 core premises or values. We could call them values. And those values are safety, connection, peace, freedom, and joy. And the lead horse is chosen based on their ability to uphold those five premises. So as they're human, like my little herd of 5 horses and 2 donkeys here at Equus, as they're human, I'm responsible to create those conditions of safety, connection, peace, freedom, and joy. Um, and if I don't, like if somehow they aren't allowed to live together in the most natural way possible, then that connection piece is impacted. And if the connection piece is impacted, then the peace piece is impacted, and so is the joy, and so is the safety. Like it all interrelates.
Mm.
What I've seen with the lead horses in wild settings and in domestic settings is that the lead horse is, obviously not the most charismatic, not the most, violent and tough. It's the one who can uphold those five principles, and they do it through care and presence.
Mhm.
Now, what's interesting about this is that I do a lot of work with the indigenous people here in northern New Mexico, the Pueblo people, and I've taken this model to some of the wise people there, some of the teachers, and they say our society is like this. Our leadership is through care and presence. It's not through dominance and force. It's care
Mhm.
and presence, and it's a
Yeah.
lateral hierarchy. Like, yes, there's leaders, but everyone has their really important role. So what if, like, what if we let our institutions in this way? What if, we elected our leaders based on their ability to uphold safety, connection, peace, freedom, and joy through care and presence?
Mhm.
What would change?
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of folks who are innately leaders, but they don't think they are because they see the current paradigm and the way we see leaders, and they think, oh, I don't have that. I don't want to boss around others. I don't want to use my power over others. And their sensitivities are correct. True leadership is care and presence. And so you'll find folks who have those innate capacities to care for the whole, care for themselves, care for the other, and care for the whole, and be profoundly present and sensitive, not insensitive, but really sensitive, really attuned. These are
Mhm.
the leaders.
Yeah, it's interesting how that ties in a little bit with what we're talking about with information. Well, I mean, there are a number of things that people might not be aware of. One, you just reminded me, and this is just a historical note, that the great Pueblo Revolt of 1680
Mhm.
happened not far from you, and that the horse was decisive in the native peoples trying to regain some independence. Because again,
Yes.
the rules were don't let them near the horses or don't let them know too much about horses, because once they get horses, it's over. So it shows that there have been historical studies on how that changed cultures here. But
Mhm.
what's interesting is that a lot of people don't realize the chief in many indigenous groups is often the person who has the least in terms of material possessions because they spend so much time giving away everything to everybody. And that they have this drove the Europeans crazy. That anybody who was a chief in many of the tribes that they encountered, it's not to say there's everything's idyllic and perfect and everybody was wise, and
Right.
but in many of the tribes the chief had no authority but could only use rhetorical skill and reasoning to get people to do things. So there, once you have if you're leading with care and presence and you have a sense of safety, security, connection,
Mhm.
joy, you can listen when
Mhm.
someone wants to convince you of what might be the right thing to do. Because
Right.
your system is in a different state and you're trusting the person because they're showing that they're just like you. They're not hoarding things, they're giving them away. They're there and
Yes.
they will not use violence. There is no power over in these structures. They would be laughed at.
Right.
And
Exactly.
we couldn't compute that. It made our heads
No.
explode.
And oftentimes settlers met war chiefs and thought that they were meaning the chiefs, but they
Right,
weren't. The
right.
chiefs
That's right.
were like tucked away, more they're more contemplative. In the horse herd, you look for the quieter, smaller, horse. And here's another really wonderful lesson from the horse that I want to bring in is you look for the horse who's moving the least. The horse who's conserving the most energy is the leader. And humans miss that memo. Like we're always squandering our energy. We're saying yes when we
Yeah,
mean no. We're having lunch with someone we don't really want to have lunch with. And like we're constantly squandering our energy.
right.
And the
Yeah,
horse really teaches us like use your energy, like you only have so much time and so much energy,
yeah,
and use it wisely because you're going to need it to get away from the lion.
yeah.
And so, if you come to my herd, you'll see that the leader, she's a mare. The herd tends to be a matriarchy. And of course, because it's the female of the species that can take care of all of everyone, not they care for the little ones. They have a much more inclusive sense of care, but it tends to be the mare, and she's smaller, and she is always really still
Mm.
until she isn't, until like, oh, something's happened and she needs to handle it right then and there, and she will. But otherwise, like, conserve
Yeah.
the energy.
You see that in spiritual teachings. It's part
Yeah.
of the Eightfold Path for Buddha, but all philosophers recognize that where and how we use our energy, what you're putting it into, what seeds you're watering with your energy are going to be
Yeah.
very constitutive of your experience of life. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, it's interesting, and I love the possibility that my ancestors from Crete, I'm a first generation person here on Turtle Island through the
Mm.
Greek lineage. It might have been that Crete was run by a college of priestesses, which sounds really delightful. And the women are always depicted in positions of power. Men, I don't think ever are. So
Yeah.
we
And
don't know
what's
exactly, but
interesting, when we think about matriarchies, then we think, oh, the priestesses or the queens or whatever are lording over the
Mhm.
men. But that's
Right,
a patriarchal concept,
exactly right. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
a matriarchy would be very lateral.
Exactly, right. And so the massive storehouses were probably just where everything was kept for everybody, just like, it would have
Right.
been, I think maybe David Graeber uses this example as today, if you want a pair of shoes, you go and buy one. And you have this very individualistic conception. You imagine, well, what did people do in the past? Well, it's really simple. You would tell your wife, I think my shoes are wearing out. And then she would go to the longhouse and she would say, I think my husband needs shoes. And then somebody would just say, well, let's get together. And then your husband's got shoes because it's all there for everybody. You don't have to have this issue. But
Mhm.
we just still are having trouble getting past that. So maybe the horse will help us rethink culture because I appreciate what you're saying. I always say that nature and culture are non-dual, and that means that we have a world because of bee culture and bee and flower culture and horse culture and beaver culture. That
Yeah.
cultures make ecologies because of this non-duality. And we have to ask, what kind of culture do we understand that we don't produce? That gross domestic product doesn't make any sense. You can only produce beings and a world that they live in.
Right.
There's no other thing that you can actually produce. And maybe the
Mhm.
horse can help us sense that.
Well, and I say to the listeners who don't have access to a horse or aren't around horses or whatever, I just go back to this earlier conversation you and I had, like, let the horse, if you feel drawn to this conversation, let the horse as a symbol in your imagination activate you. It's really that simple and that accessible.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And like if when people order photographs for the Dangerous Wisdom website, you get a meditation that goes with it, which is part of
Mhm.
helping to direct that activation. You don't need that, but you can begin to see the horse as a symbol and then actually actively pair it with certain kinds of spiritual teachings that orient the whole system a little bit more toward the wisdom, love, and beauty that the horse can help you to
Beautiful.
find. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm with you, just working with the symbol. And Jung would say that, right? Just draw them,
Yes.
paint
Yes.
them, look at them, watch documentaries about them. And
Yes. My daughter just put a horse tattoo on her rib. So tattoo.
ah, there you go, tattoo it. That's an ancient human practice where we really activate energy that way.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I would love to talk more about all these things. Maybe we'll have you back, Kelly, but I
Thank
thank you
you
so much for
so
joining
much.
us and thank you for the work that you do. I really, really appreciate that you're trying
Thank
to help
you.
humans connect with our more than human world and this powerful spiritual archetypal force. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
And thanks to all of you, my friends. I hope there are some horse lovers listening. I know that lots of people who listen just appreciate them. But if you have any stories to share about your experiences with the horse as a symbol or living horse or that combination of both, please send them in through dangerouswisdom.org. We might be able to bring some of your stories, questions, comments into a future contemplation, and maybe we can bring Kelly back. Until then, this is Dr. Nikos, your friendly neighborhood soul doctor, reminding you that your soul, the soul of the horse, and the soul of the world are not separate things. So take good care.